Hello, everybody. Welcome to NFL Football Sunday. Just kidding. I'm actually not going to be watching much NFL, except when I'm at the gym or the bar this season. It's just I don't have a TV, and frankly, I don't think it's worth the trouble anymore to give money to the NFL. They're really showing themselves to be incompetent morons. I had a nice discussion about it yesterday with. Um, Jimmy with not Angel Muniz, um, a person that you're probably familiar with if you watch the ABL show. But we're going to discuss today live because it's easier than editing or going through all the video. But I will be doing a little ongoing commentary on it through the week as I get to watch some more of the content. The draft Bernie movement and other elements on the progressive left that I found interesting. Obviously, as somebody who's not a left-wing person, I don't subscribe to socialism, democratic socialism, or otherwise. It's clearly an outsider's opinion of what's going on over there, but I can see from the way that things are going that they're not headed in the right direction, not even with this draft Bernie movement. Now, for those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, this weekend there were 55,000 signatures submitted to the office of Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont. Calls himself an independent. Submitted to draft him for a new political party to run in 2020 for president of the United States. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the. It shows to some degree that there is a public behind Bernie Sanders, but 55,000 is not a good it's a good foundation for a political party. It's actually less than I thought there would be. I thought that given the excitement with Bernie of last year that there would be well over 200,000 people signing on to that petition and trying to get him to jump ship from the Democratic Party. And I think that belief stemmed from a couple of things. First of all, there's the fact that at the Democratic convention last summer, there were more people outside making a ruckus and fighting with the cops than there were inside, shilling for Hillary Clinton. And a lot of those people that were inside the convention were booing her. It's very convenient now with the 2016 campaign behind us to forget that the Democratic convention was one of the worst political I don't even know what you would call it. It was a political eyesore for the Democratic Party. You basically had a major proportion of the people actually attending the convention that were booing the candidate that was nominated. That hasn't happened for a long, long time in my experience. The Republican convention was, by comparison, harmonious. There was the protests, and I remember because the convention was in my city. The protests were nowhere near the intensity that was predicted. There was this belief among the liberal media that there would be some sort of uprising that would basically cast Donald Trump out of Cleveland with the convention hall being mobbed and whatever. That didn't happen at the Republican convention. It happened at the Democratic convention. And the majority of the people who were involved in that, including throwing a coffin that said the Democratic Party, I think it was either the Democratic Party or the DNC, they took a coffin and they pushed it over the fence in one of the more memorable moments of the convention that was not broadcast on TV. And it's just been conveniently forgotten. And people ought to really take a moment and remember that at a certain point, it became clear that without the support of Bernie Sanders supporters, Hillary Clinton was going to lose a number of swing states. This was before the election. And he had acquired, remember, I think his vote total from the primaries was over 7 million people. And in many respects, the participation in the primaries would have been much, much lower than if Bernie Sanders had participated. There's many things you could say, in opposition to Bernie Sanders or in support of him, but I think that if you want to look at it objectively, Hillary Clinton, if she wouldn't have had a challenge from Bernie Sanders during the primary, would very likely have found other ways to screw up her own campaign. And also, there was a lot of enthusiasm that was generated on the left because of Bernie Sanders. It's not something that you really have to argue about because it's a point of fact. There were many of these primaries where there were more participants as a result of the Bernie Sanders, his personality and his views and his vision and his willingness to take more risks than Hillary Clinton. He's more of a risk-taking politician, and I wouldn't say that he's as much of a risk taker as some of the other candidates have been in the past. Dennis Kucinich, if you're just talking on the left, okay, forget about the right, where there have been people like Ross Perot and Donald Trump and Pat Buchanan that really go out there and they say things that are they're unpalatable for the media. But Dennis Kucinich was probably more of a risk taker than Bernie Sanders. He'd openly talk about seeing UFOs. He'd talk about prosecuting George Bush for war crimes. That's really the mark of somebody who knows how to go out there and not pretend that he's part of the establishment. That was Dennis Kucinich. And there's other people on the left. Ralph Nader, I think, is somewhere between Bernie and Dennis Kucinich in that note. He was significantly more willing to confront the establishment than either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. But I would say that Ralph Nader is the most significant left-wing politician of the past 30 years in the United States. And this is coming from somebody who didn't support him. But the Democratic Party is now stuck with this albatross around their neck that's called Bernie Sanders. And that's why there's a draft Bernie movement, because they know, his supporters know, that they're not welcome within the cozy confines of the DNC and the real structures of power. They know that under the wing of the Democrats, any progressive candidate would have to significantly compromise his platform and points of views and then the way he expresses himself in public in order to satisfy corporate donors. And that's what happened with Barack Obama. As the years went by, Barack Obama went from being a progressive hero to being simply a tool of the establishment. He subcontracted himself to the banking industry, to the private insurance industry to some degree. He was somebody who was clearly he betrayed the progressive causes that he himself was seen as a promoter of. And I think that we're worse off for it, because if he would have, one of two things would have happened. Okay, my opinion is that if he would have stayed true to his principles, Barack Obama would have lost in 2012. He would have been swept out of power. It doesn't matter who the nominee would have been, because single-payer healthcare would have instantly compounded the national debt much worse than it is today. As it happens, he was able to, and the healthcare industry would have totally gone and ensured that he would have been kicked out of office. Instead, what he did was he made a corrupt bargain with them, and basically ensured that single-payer healthcare would not be enacted during his term in office. It would be left for a different generation, and in exchange, the healthcare industry did not really make as much of an effort as they would have to oust him from office. They must have donated to some degree to Mitt Romney, but I think people knew going into 2012 that Mitt Romney was not going to be the candidate that would really restore the old order establishment Republicans of the Bush era to power. It just wasn't going to happen. And instead, we got this wishy-washy second term of Barack Obama, which is how we got Bernie Sanders. And the draft Bernie movement is entirely the result of that process. So that Barack Obama so committed the Democratic Party to its corporate overlords, and therefore he ended up endorsing Hillary Clinton, a candidate that he always hated, a person that is his personal nemesis. That it's become clear that for Democrats, the business of doing business is more important than the business of fulfilling their commitments to the voters. They've been promising for decades single-payer healthcare, for example. They've been promising for decades better public housing, which is something I'll probably be making a video on either today or in the next few days. But there's things that are going to kind of cloud the future of this movement. And this comes from, an honest perspective. I don't like the Bernie Sanders platform. I don't like him as a person. And a lot of his supporters piss me off. But they still have the right to seek justice and adjudication of their grievances with the Democratic Party, just like I have plenty of grievances with the Republican Party. That's why I don't want to be, I don't participate in the Republican Party. I continue to be a political independent. So I think that there's a few commonalities between independents on the right and these Bernie people in terms of just their attitude towards the system. And I've said to people before that I don't think Donald Trump can give conservative small government people the final push into becoming really a factor in the federal government and ultimately reducing the power of the federal government. I think that we do need a larger, more well-entrenched structure, better media. It's not just limited down to Donald Trump. So therefore, coming from my position as somebody, I don't have the platform that, for example, some of these clowns like John Kasich do. They get on Meet the Press all day, and they make it seem like the Republican Party base or the Republican Party voter has a problem with Donald Trump. No, I don't have the platform. The same thing with the Democratic dissidents or the dissidents on the left who might not be Democrats, they might even be independents or Green Party voters. They don't have the platform for making that clear to the media, and because the media does not want to listen, that they're a significant part of the voting bloc. That's why another event I was going to mention earlier when I was talking about the Democratic Convention being one seminal event, why I thought that the draft Bernie movement would have more than 55,000 signatures. Not that that's nothing, but I thought it would be a much larger total, something like in the hundreds of thousands. The other thing that happened was that there were well over 1 million people that voted for Jill Stein. And, I don't know if that, not to say that Jill Stein doesn't have her merits as a person. I personally, I don't give a shit. I don't like her platform either. I thought that she was the best in terms of character of the candidates, and that says a lot about Trump, Clinton, and Sanders. And sorry, I'll even throw in Sanders, but Gary Johnson. She of those candidates, I think that she had the best personality, if you want to put it that way. Just a normal person. But she had a fair amount of votes, significantly more than in 2012. So, to me, this draft Bernie movement, I was watching, and I'm gonna share it on screen, but you probably won't be able to hear the video anyway. So I'm not going to play the video or the volume. I'm going to show you on screen. This is this convention that they've been having in Washington, D.C., where they are trying to draft Bernie Sanders. And I think that it's really a show of how desperate they are. You see on stage, this is Nick Brana, the head of that movement, the draft Bernie movement. You've got Dr. Cornel West of Princeton, Shama Sawant, the Seattle City Council, Seattle City Council member, and you got Jimmy Dore, who I watch his show periodically. just to keep tabs on the progressive movement, where it's headed. And basically, these people, they were behind that movement, and they want Bernie Sanders to dump the Democratic Party and start a whole new movement, which I think, except for the Bernie Sanders part, would be, a decent idea. Why do I say except for the Bernie Sanders movement part of it? What they're doing is they're placing the future of their ideas in in basically the body of a person, Bernie Sanders, who, and this has nothing to do with the fact that it has something to do with the fact that he's old. I'm not going to lie about that. But you cannot just attribute your entire platform and your movement and what you believe in to one person. The ideas that Bernie Sanders expounded on the campaign trail, even though he had a very good amount of success doing it compared to people who've done it before, they weren't his too. Like I said, people have done it before. And when he dies, people are going to be supporting his ridiculous policies also in other ways. And what they have to do, and this is speaking from a strategy standpoint, forget about the fact that I don't agree with him on anything, and I despise him as a person. But the fact of the matter is that progressives have to look for a future beyond Bernie Sanders. And the fact that they actually call the party the Draft Bernie Party and not something, and that's the way it's mostly known, is a problem. I think that their strategy there is that they're going to use the notoriety of Bernie Sanders as a way to raise awareness for their party as a whole. Okay, that's a good point, but this has happened in other countries in the past. There are parties that they form using the name of their leader. It happens in Australia all the time. I think one of their parties is called like the Palmer United Party. And then they have the Xenophon list, Nick Xenophon list, which is I think it's a center-left party. Yeah, those parties, they're centered around one personality, and once that person experiences some sort of event that takes them out of politics, the party falls apart. And it happens all around the world. This isn't something new. I think that you can build something around him, and eventually, you can pass the torch to somebody else. And but when you form a party, here's one of the issues with that, with personality politics. Okay. Now, obviously, in socialism, there's a past of personality cults developing around certain people that are at the head of the movement. Now, let's throw that one to the side right now. Let's pretend that that's not the case that's happening, which, I think there's plenty of people that are open-minded in the Bernie Sanders movement that aren't like that. So I'm not going to say that that's what's happening. There's some people that are behaving that way, though. But the issue is that when you take a central figure, somebody who the identity of the movement develops along with the identity of the central figure, once that person passes away from the scene, like I said, there is an issue of who will replace him as the leader of that group or idea. And then there's the worst problem where when he's alive, if Bernie Sanders were to be sorry, I'm not going to say that he's going to die, but because I know some of you pretty much roast me for that. But as long as he's active in the party, the issue can sometimes lead to the fact that people are insecure about other leaders developing within it, which is a major issue for somebody of Bernie Sanders' age. This is why you see on the stage of that town hall that I showed you before, there were 4 other people that are now gaining or they have had followings within the progressive movement, especially Kshama Sawant, who's the city council member in Seattle. But and by the way, she's a member of the socialist alternative movement over in Washington State. So she's not even leaving the Democratic Party. She just never was a member. The issue with a party that's centered around one individual and his ideas is that you eventually get, this vacuum at the top, because in order to centralize the identity of the party within that person, the people that are below them, they fight in order to determine who's going to be next in line. It's probably going to be the way it shakes out in almost any party that's not one of the main two parties. Obviously, when George Bush was winding down his time in office in the Democratic Party, there was an open primary for who would be the next Republican nominee. The same thing went for the Democratic Party in the run-up to 2008. The same thing happened now, think about it, during an election where there's an incumbent, though, when Barack Obama ran in 2012, okay, he was the default nominee. There was a primary process. Virtually nobody participated because there was nobody who would have been able to credibly challenge Barack Obama for the nomination. Similarly, when George Bush ran for re-election, there was nobody on the Republican side that could credibly challenge him for the nomination. This is the starting point where the draft Bernie party would begin. You would not, and that's because it would be entirely centered around him as the leader. And it might be that that's just a better strategy for him, as opposed to running again in the Democratic convention when you could have all these snakes trying to take him down like last time. There's a certain strategic advantage short term for him to run on his own party platform, just a Bernie Sanders party platform, as opposed to running for office as a Democrat and trying to go through that gauntlet of primaries again. He would still probably lose the entire South. He's very unpopular in most of the South, and you could get this. Some of these far left candidates in the Democratic Party, they would go, that you would have other people sniping at him. Whereas in his own party, there would be nobody sniping at him. He would be the party itself. It would all center around him. Now that might be good for 2020, when you need him to have a clear path to the nomination, right? All you need him then to do is to collect enough signatures in each state to appear on the ballot. Probably not that difficult of an issue given his massive following. But then, beyond 2020, looking to the election after that, you will find a problem, because if, and I'll assume that he does not win in 2020, because he's going to have a hard time attracting voters from either party to his wing that are, from the Democrats, he is going to draw some voters, but from the Republicans, you're going to have a lot of people that will be like, yeah, we might as well vote for Donald Trump. It's not like anybody else is going to win. So beyond 2020, he will then have the stigma after 2 election losses in 2016 and 2020 that he can't win. And then the question is whether the party continues under him. He gets this, and people in his own movement start to realize, how long can we just depend on him? Then there will be infighting in the movement. There will be the loyalists, people that say, yeah, we think that Bernie Sanders is he's the spirit of this movement, and what it becomes really the personality-based movement that it doesn't have to be. Whereas if he would have run for a party, another third party, let's say there's the Peace and Freedom Party, that's one of the far left movements, the Green Party, one of those movements, he would have a good chance of winning the nomination there, and probably winning a couple of electoral votes. He could win in Oregon, he could win in Vermont, obviously. He might be able to win an election in or some electoral votes in one of those states like Washington or New Mexico, possibly. There's plenty of places where Bernie Sanders could attract electoral votes, either in his own party or with the Green Party, and it would create the impetus for that party growing, which would be different from his own personal party, where after 2 electoral losses, you kind of wonder if the party is really about him or if the party is really about his ideas. And then you have to have somebody who comes in 2024 there will inevitably be somebody who challenges him. That's just the way it works. This is pure game theory here. After so many failures, there's somebody who questions your ability to have any success. And these are, some of these things are successes, but he lost a lot of primaries by a significant margin, especially in the South. This is not a candidate that is going to win the presidency. Now, on to the question of 2020, how well could the party do in 2020? That depends on, 2 or 3 factors. The first factor is where the Democratic Party is going to be in 2020. And all signs indicate that the political landscape is ripe for undoing the Democratic Party and basically relegating it to the dustbin of history until they do a significant reformation and reinvent themselves and pick a platform that's at least representative of somebody's core beliefs and not the beliefs of its donors. I think that that's a real issue. Whether the Democratic Party will have a viable candidate and platform in 2020. The second factor that I think is going to be a real problem for whoever is running in 2020 for any party is how well the economy is doing. Now, there are people that are indicating, especially some of the currency people I watch, rethinking the dollar. Sometimes they're run by a guy who has a good handle on it. There's people who think that there's going to be a significant currency crisis driven by our debt to China and other creditors. If something like that happens, I think that there's definitely a chance that the draft Bernie party could have a huge impact on the election. If, however, that or any other economic disaster does not occur, and you see the Donald Trump vision for 2020 coming into fruition, where there's more manufacturing, there's cooperation between both branches of government, and he's able to get some pieces of legislation passed. He still controls Congress. Okay, so if the Democrats don't perform well in 2018, which I don't think that they're going to perform well. I think they're actually going to give him more ground. If all that comes into play, there's nobody who can beat Donald Trump in 2020 if that happens. There's already a reason to believe that there's Democrats who will soon. Somebody just sent me this stupid message. No, I don't think that the Democrats, based on 2018, they're going to mount a significant challenge to Donald Trump in 2020. They are in dire straits. They have, I think, 25 of the seats up for grabs are either Democrats or Democrat caucusing independents like Sanders and the other guy. I think his name is Angus King from Maine. No, I don't think that they're going to do well. They have almost no chance of getting anywhere in the Senate. In fact, they're probably going to lose a lot of ground in the Senate compared to right now. It could end up being something like a 56 to 42 split in the Senate in favor of the GOP, which would do a lot to forwarding Trump's agenda, especially if some of those people that get elected are opponents of Mitch McConnell. The same thing in the House. You're going to see a lot of pressure on Paul Ryan to actually pass laws that will benefit the Trump agenda. And after 2018, he doesn't have any excuses. Right now, his excuses are already weak. After 2018, what are his excuses? They're almost non-existent. You think that this is not going to get your people elected? Well, I mean, you haven't lost you haven't lost a single House election since 2010. This will be 2018. If 2018 proves to be an election where the Republicans control the House or gain in the House, again, there's going to be the excuses will be gone, because it would now mean that the Republicans have controlled the House for 10 consecutive years, or they're going to be controlling the House for 10 consecutive years. And if you really think about it, the Democrats have controlled the House of Representatives for only 4 years since 1994. That's you know, that's, what is it? 4 out of 26 years that the Republicans have controlled the House since 1994. If the Republicans can win in 2018, which there's no reason to believe that they can't. The Democrats are such a divided party because of what we've been talking about here, with the draft Bernie movement and with other primary challenges going on, that there's virtually no chance for the Democrats to get anywhere in 2018. That's why I think that instead of, this is my proposal, okay? I'm going to send this to somebody that I do watch on the left a little. My proposal is this, that fuck 2020 for right now. You know, Bernie Sanders can go screw himself, as far as you're concerned, until 2020, because there's no reason for, I mean, you can think ahead. I mean, I'm not saying don't do anything in order to think about 2020, but think about it this way. In 2018, all you have to do is primary a lot of these Democrats, and a lot of these people are talking about that anyway. Primary a lot of these Democrats, get them booted out by progressives, and you know, whether they win the general election or not, at that point doesn't really matter. You have, for example, and I think in some places this is not going to work because it's too conservative. You know, West Virginia, there's people like Jimmy Dore that are dreaming of West Virginia falling because Joe Manchin is too far to the center. They think, oh, we're going to primary him, kick him out, and then we're going to have a progressive in there. I think her name is Swearingen or something, and that's what they think is going to happen. No. You don't understand. Joe Manchin has only one real challenger, and that is whoever's going to be the Republican nominee. There is not going to be a progressive candidate winning in West Virginia. It doesn't matter how hard you try. That's going to be a race where that person gets destroyed utterly. Despite, and you know, this is regardless of the fact that Bernie did well in 2016. There, won the Democratic primary by a massive margin. The only reason that happened was because there is like a significant union vote in West Virginia, that there are 4 things like single payer, and because they hate Hillary Clinton because of her war on coal. Now, if you know the candidate Joe Manchin, for example, he starts talking about war on coal in terms of his progressive opponent, it's over. It's over. That's what they really care about. Bernie Sanders did not talk about a war, you know, ending coal mining while he was in West Virginia. I think he believed in it, but I don't think he really emphasized it. And thanks to that, he destroyed Hillary Clinton and did gain a significant following in West Virginia, which subsequently, most of those people ended up voting for Donald Trump. Okay, and the real problem for Joe Manchin right now is not attracting quote-unquote Bernie Sanders voters, which there are some in West Virginia, but a significant number of those Bernie Sanders supporters are now Donald Trump supporters, because he's been working to get coal mines reopened, and that's what they want. A lot of these people do want the coal mines. Whether you think that's right or not, it doesn't matter. We're talking strategy here. We're not talking about what policy is correct or isn't correct. We're just talking strategy for now. The other issue with that I think that in some areas of the country, yeah, I think that they're going to go and give the centrist Democrats a huge kick in the ass. You know, there's states where, for example, California, states that are already progressive, firmly blue, you're going to see a real earnest challenge on the left to centrist Democrats. There's already a guy trying to primary Nancy Pelosi in the Bay Area. I don't know if that's really going to work. You know, that's a real area where I can't make a prediction. But there's parts of California where these centrist Democrats are just going to be chased out of office. I think, you know, barring some sort of similar shenanigans that was done by the DNC in 2016, I think some of these people, they're going to be shown the door by progressives. And then we'll see how many progressives get elected. I mean, there's already other like strong progressives in Congress. They might not be as strong as, you know, the Bernie crowd thinks that they should be, but, you know, Barbara Lee of California, she's pretty fucking far left. Bobby Rush is pretty far left. You have, you know, there's not a ton of them that have a national name. I mean, there's Tulsi Gabbard. They talk all the time about Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She is, you know, I think that as somebody who's on the right, I think that she's somebody who can have a significant chance of attracting a major national following one day. You know, she's not somebody who sells out her platform for the corporations, the left and right. I think she's a legitimate person for them to promote, and some of them are promoting her. So why do we think about 2020? Oh, we're going to draft Bernie. Whatever, this is what they're talking about. It's not going to work, and you know, they have to really start thinking about who's going to be the replacement. You know, I think Gabbard would be, I mean, a possibility. Why, if Bernie Sanders ran and he had no name recognition in 2015, and by 2016 he was this massive sensation, Tulsi Gabbard now has some name recognition on the national level. You know, she's starting from a point that's much farther advanced than Bernie Sanders. He should get behind her. They should form a new party, and, you know, they could have a ticket where, you know, either she's the front of the ticket and he's the running mate, or vice versa. And then after 2020, they have to retire him because it's over. He's not going to. First of all, he's not going to win in 2020. You can fucking forget it. There's not going to be any sort of significant ground shaking that's going to make it so that Bernie Sanders, a guy who's clearly been compromised by a number of issues, with the foremost among them, forget the 3 houses and the fucking, you know, the scandal with his wife, which I think that there is merit to. Okay, forget those. The real scandal is that he endorsed Hillary Clinton. Okay, so you can leave those scandals on the side. I know Bernie people aren't going to listen to me anyway about them, because they don't care, because anything he does is all it's a smear campaign by the corporations. They're trying to silence the voice of progressive change. No, those scandals are real, but the real scandal that Bernie supporters, and this is where I'm going to leave you, where they can't really explain it, is that Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton and campaigned for her for months and then never went and atoned for that. That is his sin on him. He could have just bowed out and gone home and shut the fuck up and waited, and, you know, waited for Groundhog Day or something. And he didn't do it. He didn't do it at all. He went and he caved to them entirely. So that is something that people should take into account, which is why, you know, the progressive people, they need a new candidate, a new good candidate for them. That's it. Have a great Sunday. This is Ramon, bold like a leopard. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will speak to you later. I know some of you are just busy today. Also, you know, there's a pretty long video, but I want to hear your thoughts and your reaction.